or a book called Language. And it's a philosophy of life for 255 chapters. And each chapter culminates in an architectural and and one of the chapters is called Shop Front School. And he basically made the observation, translated to today, that it costs $20,000 to $25,000 a year to educate a child in public or private. And that a 20 to 1 student-to-teacher ratio, teachers are not making $500,000 a year. So where's that money going? And basically, he observed that to operate a school at a certain scale, you need a certain amount of organizational and institutional overhead, and that overhead ends up eating up about half the cost. And so he had very simple solutions, which was make small schools, 2 teachers, 20 children. The teachers are the administrators, and you reduce the schools by a third to a half by increasing the, or decreasing the student-to-teacher ratio and increasing the quality of the learning. So as a side effect, when you have small schools like this, you can place them around the city such that every child can walk to school. Should all these benefits children walking to school. And then from my perspective, I mean, one of the things I've noticed is I come from the startup world, and the startup world, in the small organization, when you have an idea, you can implement it the next day. Whereas in a bigger organization, you have to bring it up to your manager, and your manager's manager, and to the board, and to all the group, and they come back and they have all these notes, and at the end of the day, if the idea even gets, it's a very different idea than when it started. And the consequence of environments like that is that you have people stop coming up with ideas. And so by keeping kind of small schools, it allows for nimble responsiveness and innovativeness that is harder to do in higher schools. So that's the first principle, is that they're not schools. The second principle is that they're Montessori schools. And basically one of the things that I've observed is that in the United States, through the best intentions of the parents, the Montessori method gets to the business. The parents say, it would be great to have a gym class. It would be great to have a foreign language class. It would be great to have a computer class. And all of them in and of themselves are fine. But one of the key aspects of Montessori is 3-hour uninterrupted work hours. And when you divide that up into 3 work periods with 2 specials in between, it's like getting 8 hours of sleep in 1 hour each chunk. It's a very different quality. And so the second principle is that these are authentic Montessori. The third principle is that there's been very little research done on Montessori since William Montessori himself. And the world has changed a lot in the last 100 years. And so these are all lab schools where we're constantly doing research. And basically the research is 2 buckets. One is there are modern fluencies that weren't important in William Montessori's time, like computer science. And how do you teach computer science in a Montessori way, where it wouldn't involve computers in the classroom, and it would be concrete, tactile, multisensory, didactic, self-correcting material. And luckily, I mean, the truth about computer science is it has actually very little to do with computers themselves, in the same way that television and engineering has very little to do with watching TV. So we can teach kind of support like binary numbers, binary counting, binary arithmetic, graph coloring, graph propagation algorithms, all in the context of Montessori materials that we're designing in the for 2, 3, 4-year-olds. It's really wonderful to see and understand and pick up these concepts that they wouldn't be introduced to until college. Not because those concepts are difficult and should be introduced to college, but because that's the way our education is. Another theme of research tends to be in observation. So Montessori is all about observation, and traditionally the way that observation happens is by taking lots and lots of notes. But we now have lots of other ways of doing observation. So for example, we're experimenting with things like video cameras in the classroom where we do image recognition, where we recognize where the children's feet are, so we can do a heat map of the classroom for each child. And because the Montessori classroom is organized both developmentally and also by a subject matter, so you have like a classical life area, sensorial area. You get a good sense of what the child is doing in the process of their self-construction by knowing where they are in the classroom. We're also experimenting with biometric sensors that we'll put, like a wristband that we'll put on the wrist of children to identify intra-heart rate variability, to identify stress stress, and correlating with that video to understand kind of environments that cause stress. So that's the third principle, is that it's a lab school. Fourth principle is that I feel like children have so much to learn from seeing adults in their work, especially if they work with their hands, and especially if they're doing creative work. Adults have a lot to learn from children being around. And right now, as a society, we tend to separate them. And so the first principle is the principle that I call artists in the basement. There's always somebody doing creative work with their hands on the premises. So this school has the artist studio in the basement, and it has the artist in residence. After, the second school has a recording studio in the back, and there's musicians on the premises. Wild Rose, a third school, is in the back, bookstore, in the bookstore. And what happens is, not only do the children have access to these adults, but the adults also come into the classroom. So on Thursday, Candy, artist in residence here, comes and does her work in the classroom in the morning alongside. So there's art show of love time actually going on right now, which is Candy and the children's work. The fifth principle is that I trained for 9 years after high school to be a professor. And my training to be a father, it's a much more consequential job because this is a reading form of books. So I wanted to kind of create a space that's not just for children to learn, but for parents to learn as well. And so the fifth principle is blurring the boundaries between homeschooling and institutional schooling, bringing home into school and school into home. So, for example, at Wildflower, 9:30 to 12:30 on Fridays are parent days. The parents are in the classroom doing the Wildflower tour. The teachers at Wildflower come home to the families, to each family and have dinner or go to the park or something like that. And so we basically kind of bring Wildflower into the home and bring home into Wildflower. The sixth principle is that when you think of a big school, you think about, well, you need a cafeteria, and you need a gym, and you need a playground, and so on. But when you think of a chocolate school, the calculus changes. Instead of trying to get a big space that has all of these things, you try to shape the city around you to be friendlier to families and children. And so the sixth principle is the principle that I call shaping the city. So you see it as various, in various guises, like next door at Dwell Time, they put in a low table for the Wildflower children. And so it's reserved for Wildflower children from 12:30 to 1:30, but it's usable by the entire community the rest of the day. The park around the corner, tomorrow we're actually going to be planting the first urban public food forest in the nation at Lee Street. And it'll be great for the children to experience gardening and to learn about permaculture, but this is something that's useful for the whole community as well. And we're exploring kind of trying to take out two of these parking spots and make it into a little parklet in front. And so these kinds of things, basically what they do is they don't see the school as an insular thing, but rather as a change agent for the city as a whole. The idea being that the whole city should be the classroom for our children. So that's the sixth principle. The seventh principle is a respect and presence in nature. And so you can see, for example, we've made a very natural classroom. But also we spend, so when the weather's nice, Friday parent days, we'll spend at Walden Pond for the whole 3 hours on Friday. And it seeps into even the little things like the nutritional guidelines, right? So human bodies are in nature as well, and so we avoid things like Doritos, and we try to eat things like organic apples. So that's the seventh principle is a respect for and time in nature. The eighth principle is that I see just a tremendous amount of inequality in the world, and the eighth principle is to work hard to make the schools accessible for those who need it the most. It's implemented in different ways in different schools, and everything is an experiment. But in Wildflower and Aster, the first two schools, it's implemented as a gift economy. So they're tuition-free schools that are supported by gifts from the parents. It's a wonderful spirit to teach to our children. And also it turns out pragmatically to end up working out. There are some families who end up paying much more than a private school tuition, some families who end up paying much less. And so far it's been working out in terms of the math. Part of the benefit to having it in this implementation, a tuition-free school that's supported by gifts, is that the gifts are tax deductible, and so families could pay more than what they would pay at a kind of a contractual tuition base. And then the last principle is that if you make one school, you basically give a few families an alternative for their child's education. But if you build 15 schools in the city, you start to change the way the whole city thinks about learning. And not only that, but each school is stronger because of the presence of the others. And so the eighth principle is that these schools are not islands, but rather nodes in a network. And each school feels responsibility to support and build relationships with the other schools, including helping to start the schools. So those are the 9 principles that are Wildflower schools. And I think that's an appropriate time. I feel like I've talked a bunch, so it's an appropriate time to open it up for any questions on the overall model, but also for your situation in particular.
Do you want to share questions from the group? Do you have those?
Yeah, so there's a pretty substantial list of questions from the group. Some of them are pragmatic. I think, I guess for us, for the most part, we're very interested in the Wildflower model, and I think you speak very eloquently about it, as does everyone else involved. And so I guess for us, most of the questions are, how do we make this happen?
Yes.
So I guess kind of, can you walk us through big picture what that looks like? Is it, we say we'd like a school, and then like how much involvement do we have?
So there's varying levels. Really the idea is, my hope is to, there's this wonderful, I had this wonderful conversation with a friend of mine who's an acupuncturist. And he said, acupuncturists, we don't heal people. And the body's energy can heal people themselves, know how to heal themselves. But sometimes those energies are blocked, and as acupuncturists, our role is to release those energies when they're blocked, to unblock them when they're blocked. And I thought that was a very wonderful metaphor. And I see our role in Wildflower is very similar. As I think kind of families and teachers have the energy and have the ability to create their schools, but a lot of times that energy is blocked through cost, through opacity, through a culture which doesn't, in which sending a child to school is a consumer behavior rather than a producer behavior. And so I see a lot of Wildflower's role is to help to unblock those energies. We do it in various ways. The first couple of schools, we basically start, and what we're moving more towards is facilitating the starting of schools in Wildflower. And so let me talk. So part of that we'll be starting to talk through with you guys as to what that looks like, what the nuts and bolts are. And so you guys are right now interested in a toddler co-op, is that right?
Yeah, and very likely two
toddler co-ops. So let me break down. And you said there was something like around 12 families interested per co-op, is that right?
Yeah, so it's, the whole group right now is 33 people who are interested. There's 14 who are very excited and feel pretty well committed that if this happens, it's something that they want. They'll put a lot of energy into making it happen. And we also, because of the reality of toddlers, the needs for childcare are a little different, so it's not necessarily full-time. Some families might be interested in part-time.
Yeah.
But I think it settles to be around 12.
So I'll kind of give a ladder of potentialities. One is the Bluebonnet groups that are happening with Marcia, and those are the easiest things to start because there's no overhead and it's a la carte. So basically, as long as Marcia can get paid what she needs to live, these programs can get started to go on. And so those programs are started basically by an anchor parent that's 5 or 6 families together, and then they rotate around homes, and Marcia sends home. The second level would be kind of in terms of costs would be, and right now there is, so what you guys are exploring, there is no precedent for. You guys would be the first doing it. So the 3 to 6 schools are a big jump up from that because it's center-based and there's 2 teachers. And so basically you have the biggest costs are the rent and the teachers. There's upfront costs for the setup and materials, but those are things that we could help with through things like no interest loans or something like that. But the biggest recurring costs are salaries and rent. Rent tends to be, for this space, $3,500 a month. For the East Chamber space, it's $2,900 a month. It's about $3,000 to $3,500 a month in general. And then salaries, and that becomes about $40,000 a year.
Can I ask you a question about that? How has it been finding like the right space and like I mean we were talking about yesterday how there seems to be places available, like places unfortunately got a business, like how easy do you think that process is finding the right place?
So having a storefront is really interesting because you have a relationship, a small relationship, but a relationship with the outside world. Like the children understand that they're in a community, and the community understands that there's children present. There are the things that the biggest pain and the biggest unknown are the licensing. So, as an example, the licensing requirements require that if you have a school, any school, it has to have 3 bathrooms. One for male teachers, one for female teachers, and one for the children. There are now, for the first year, there's 6 children at Wildflower. So to have 3 bathrooms for 6 children. And what happened was the licensor, I think, willfully ignored it. We didn't bring it up. And we were prepared, and we had kind of estimates for how to build 2 more bathrooms. And basically it was really... but the licensor didn't bring it up. As a co-op, you guys have, you guys are very lucky because the co-ops are exempt from licensing requirements.
Because of parents teaching.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically parents getting together and spending time with their children. And the tricky part is where it, what they'll say, as soon as a co-op has a paid staff member, they cease being a co-op. And so you have to be creative about how you bring a teacher on board, and you can say something like, this is not a paid staff member of the school. The families got together and had a consultant or a babysitter or something like that helps them with, So that's the path that I recommend, is because the most challenging part of the licensing is the unknown. you get the license, you get it, and then they might come and say, well, you need 3 bathrooms, you're already renting the space. And so, at the same time, it's useful to go through the process just internally because there's some things that I think are worth doing regardless of licensing. So, for example, you want to make sure that there's no lead paint, and so on and so forth. And they sell these kind of things out. It's useful to have 2 exits. So I would look at the licensing requirements for that. The licensing requirements are findable online. We're in the process of trying to make them simple, a simple checklist. I don't know if we'll get them in time, simplified in time for your guys' interest. So I recommend starting to look at the documentation.
Nicole, I can do that. And I did it as well for my other job.
Cool. You guys are moving ahead of where I was.
For daycares in particular. I didn't do daycares, but I did residential childcare. So it's actually more strict, I think.
But basically, I mean, they also give good guidelines. I mean, so for example, they'll say 35 square feet per child. I would actually recommend more. I mean, 50 square feet per child feels good to me, especially as they're ambulatory. So that's the rent. And then there's the teacher's salary, and that's really a wide range. Without going into specifics, because I want to name the individual teacher's privacy, I mean, that can range from $40,000 a year to $75,000 a year. Now, there's ways to address this as well, which is that one could imagine if you have 2 co-ops and they're not 8 to 3, one teacher can be split amongst the 2.
Can I ask, was that number inclusive of benefits? Because we, of course, want to make sure that we're...
Yeah. I'd say for a junior teacher, you get $40,000 wouldn't include the benefits. For a senior teacher, $75,000 would not include the benefits. And basically, kind of a rule of thumb that I tend to use is salary and a half. So you can kind of, go.
My other question, I don't know if it's more for you or more for Nicole and leaders, but it sounds like the co-op is, like you said, like a unique thing that's being started. So do you have any thoughts on how that would work with the gift economy? If parents are also volunteering time and wanting to
Totally, I mean, I'll tell you, the gift economy worked well in these first 2 because I provided a backstop. I said, we're going to do this experiment. If it doesn't work out, if it doesn't make cost, I'll just pay the rest. I'm starting to run out of my ability to do so. But that made it easy in terms of implementation because we could just say, well, let's try that and see what works. There's several ways. I mean, the gift economy is just an implementation of a principle that is access for all. You can choose how you wish to implement that principle. I mean, you can do sliding scale tuition, and if you'd like to do that, there's this thing called, there's this form that we'd be able to help you with that there's this organization that people can enter their information and it can give back what they would recommend to the family to pay. You could, so that's one. 2 is you could say, here's a set tuition, but there's scholarships available. So there's lots of ways that you can implement those access for all. By and large, for me, who I'm most interested in this is families who are ensuring access to family services in poverty systems. To have at least 1 or 2 families living in poverty to be able to have access to these schools. I think it's not only good for those families, it's also good for the but there's a wide range of implementational styles about how to do that. We may just say we have 2 spots that are free, we'll go recruit those 2 free spots, and then the rest we'll kind of figure out how to pay for it ourselves. So like that before teacher salary. So what does the financial picture look like? And so basically kind of you're looking at somewhere between, if you have 1 teacher, between, then you have, I would plan for $10,000 to $15,000 in incidental through insurance, through repairs, through new materials and so on. And so you're looking somewhere between $100,000 to $300,000 per
And does that include the startup cost, getting the space in order?
So that doesn't include the startup cost, and I'll talk through the startup cost right now. In the startup cost, this is something that we'd like to experiment with, because what we're finding is that the startup costs are the biggest barrier, and so we want to find ways to reduce those, and we're not sure how yet. We're looking into finding ways to give interest-free loans for the startup costs. We're looking into finding ways to help people bootstrap the startup costs. So start say with a smaller number of materials and grow the materials over time. To start with family furniture, and then just that out with community. So these we don't know, and we don't know yet, and this will be a wonderful process of exploration, is how to kind of reduce those costs. But just to give you a sense of the full cost, making the space beautiful like this costs about $35,000, which is incredibly cheap for making a space like this. So the artist who does this is this woman named Kim Allen, which is fantastic. The materials can cost, it's hard to say for a toddler classroom. For 3 to 6 classrooms, the materials can cost $35,000 to $40,000, but they're wildly overpriced. That shelf costs $250, which you can have an artisan build it for half that price. So there's something that I have learned to call the Montessori markup. You put Montessori in front of something and it just gets more expensive. And so we're exploring ways to, so in the lab, one of the things we're doing is we're designing all sorts of new Montessori materials. And we're kind of starting to explore a process that we call the Wildflower certified Liu-Packard, where we give the design and local artisans can make the material. So to the extent that people know woodworkers, this would be something that would be very interesting for us, and to decrease the cost.
Do they have to be professional, or just like? Because I'm thinking about our group where we have plenty of people like adults. No, I mean, my husband as well, and I think there were a couple others that mentioned it when we could build things, but they're not kind of really their
So,
right.
There's a huge range of materials. You don't have to be a professional to build a shelf, or a table. And so I want to, I really want to, part of the whole thing is decreasing the barrier to entry across the board. So we are interested in people who know woodworking, whether it be at the professional level or at the amateur level. And what then we could do is we could basically give a materials list, and people can see what they can build. But those are the 2 key elements of the startup cost. The other startup cost element, and this will be obviated in the co-op, is a lot of times you have to hire the teachers earlier in order to do things like licensing. Whereas in a toddler co-op program, especially as they're bluebonnet groups that are transitioning into a co-op program, those teachers will already be in the picture and talking to you guys and things like that.
Can I ask about the lab schools, kind of in more detail what form that takes, and also in terms of, because it seems like what you've described for the lab schools, some of that is really for the benefit of the children, and some of it is for the benefit of education overall. And how the costs are shared between the Wildflower Foundation now.
So basically, kind of, at the beginning, the idea was that each school would be a lab school of MIT, basically. And that works well for one school or two schools. But as I think about 1,000 schools, it becomes very overwhelming. And so really, kind of, the role that I see the lab playing is to help these schools, each school become its own lab school, and to provide the framework, the materials, and the tools in order for the parents and the teachers to do research in the school on their own. So as an example, I mean, I talked about the heart rate monitors, basically. Those are things that it's not one school is going to monopolize the heart rate monitors. And so those are things that can be shared, and probably essentially at the foundation level. Here are a bunch of heart rate monitors that any school can check out at any time at the lab. And here's a research protocol around that. And here's a way to share your results with the community. And so basically kind of creating a shadow journal, which reads more like a blog, or what it'll probably start as is a conference, basically, where the individual schools can go and talk to the other schools about the kind of research that they've done and what they've learned from that and how that can improve all of their practice work.
Can I ask, because this would be, is there another toddler center in the works, or would this be the first?
This would be the first.
So would our school then, if it was off the ground, would it be an MIT-affiliated lab school, or?
Yeah, and I think the way that we have those affiliations is like Marcia has a seat at the lab as well. We're careful about the schools themselves. MIT doesn't operate schools, and I have to go through a bunch of hoops if I try to kind of make that happen. And so that's the way that we do it, is that we have heads and assistant head of schools who are spending a lot of time in the lab, and who are members of the lab as well as members of the school.
And can I kind of ask, as a follow-on to that, because this is the first toddler center that would be operating under the name of the Wildflower, kind of how much control you want to have over what things would be like for us to say that we're affiliated?
Totally. So I'll tell you kind of the long run and the short run. Basically, kind of, for me, the 9 principles are very important. And so if somebody would come to me and say, you know, I really don't want to have anything to do with shaping the city, or I don't want to have it be a lab school, or, then it wouldn't be a Wildflower school, you know. So that's the level of control, so to speak, that I'd like. And it's not about control, it's more about kind of setting a DNA so that other schools can come and say, this is what a Wildflower school looks like. You know? The implementation of those principles, I don't want control over. I want people to be able to kind of have a decision come up and say, how does this fit with the principles? What decisions can we make with the principles? You know? I'll give you one example, which is so Wildflower and Aster have a start time of 9:30, and we like that because we take a look at the principles and we say, well, one of the principles is shaping the city, and one way to shape the city is to take cars off the road at rush hour. Another principle is blurring the boundaries between homeschooling and institutional schooling, and so having parents be able to have a long breakfast with their children before coming to school, it's consistent with that principle, you know. And so those two principles make a 9:30 start feel very natural. But I wouldn't impose kind of control at that level of detail of saying, you have to have a 9:30 start. I would suggest that, you know, that would be consistent with these principles, but you guys would make those decisions and really at the end, kind of for school, for these first schools, it looks much more like this. Like we're all hanging out, having lots of conversations about what the future might look like. And this will continue for the rest of the
And then, so going forward, what does it look like?
So
What
what's
should
the
our
next step?
steps be? Yeah.
Well, you know, let me do some back of the envelope. But I mean, I think, so one of the parts about blurring homeschooling and institutional schooling is having a training. And I think Catherine has talked to you guys about that. Catherine must have talked to you about that. And also kind of starting through these Blue Bonnet groups to give us some time to go to do that training, talk about what things will look like in the classroom and so on, and give us some time to stuff like that. I think what we should do is we should put together some kind of financial model, basically, and understand what it would take to what it would take monetarily to start this school. And so let me just play with some thoughts in my head. So that's one, and let me say the second thing is there's some conceptual things that I'd like to have more conversations with us and some of the other Montessorians about, which is one of the things that is important, especially for toddlers, is at around age 18 months to at around 3.5 and beyond, but peaking at around 20 months, so like right where you guys would be, is what's called the sensitive period for order, where children really like routine, they really like structure, they really like consistency. And it's very, I don't know how to do it in an environment, I don't know how to do it yet in an environment where the teachers are rotating each time. And that's something that is a very rich topic for exploration, and I'd love to have that conversation with people other than just me in the room. People like Mary and Missy and Catherine are so rich in their Montessori knowledge and experience that I'd like to have that conversation. So there's that conversation that we'll want to have, and then we'll have the kind of the pragmatic nuts and bolts of the money to get things started. And let me see. I mean, let's take the. I mean, basically, the way that I think about it is, say we have. I think we can make things work at $120,000, $130,000 a year, which would mean. Well, you probably want more children. Yeah. So in the 3 to 6, we start with a small number of children because it's a mixed age from 3 to 6, and we want the 6-year-olds to not be older, but to be more experienced. And so we start with 3-year-olds, and the next year we have 3-year-olds. With the toddler program, it doesn't make sense to phase in that way because they're only there for a year and a half. So you could have it for 12, 13, 14, 7. I'd still recommend starting it with, like, at least for the first couple of months, starting it with smaller, like 10, 11, or 12, and adding on. It's just easier to work out the goals when there's a small amount.
Do you know what the legal ratio requirements are of parents to children for co-ops?
You know, so the co-ops are not regulated. So you have 1 to 20. I recommend highly against that.
Right. So that's nice if we have a parent teacher.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd suggest basically, I mean, let's throw out some ballpark numbers, right? And then you can tweak them based on But you could have 10 families. That would mean if you do something like 5 days a week, have a teacher and 2 parents there each day rotating. And then that gives a cost of, say, $12,000 a year. So that, an average cost of $12,000 a year. So that's one way to just do some numbers. And then if that cost is feeling too high, you can dial up the number of families or dial down the number of days or so on and so forth. Or dial down the number of days with a teacher and have Fridays be parent-only days. And that's something that's completely workable.
About the space, how many days a week are kids here and how many hours?
In Wildflower, it's 5 days a week, 9:30 to 12:30 for the 3-year-olds. It will be 9:30 to 2:30 next year. There's a couple of reasons why we start at 9:30 to 12:30. One is the state requires, for those schools that are licensed with this series, if there are children under 4, and not over 50% of the children, and 50% of the children are under 5, then you have to have a separate place for napping. And by the way, this is one of the things that you'll find in the regulations that it's like, if there's like 4 6-year-olds and 3 12-year-olds, like you don't have to be licensed. So we would have to have a space to nap at our current, and we don't have a space to nap. So that's one pragmatic reason. But there's 2 other reasons. One is that a lot of the children are coming from home care situations or being at home with their parents, and so having the first half of the year being a half a day is really good for the children. The third is that the teachers actually learn a whole bunch of new stuff. I mean, it's a new job, which is they have to learn how to do research, they have to learn how to not only be a teacher but be an administrator, and so all of these things, it's useful to have that second half of the day to spend time on for the first year.
Can I ask, how does insurance work for a co-op?
Yeah. That's interesting. I know I can point you to the insurance company for the school, and there is insurance. It's not cheap, but the main costs are the rent and the salary, so it's cheap compared to those. I don't know exactly what the policy is for co-op, but I generally recommend getting insurance.
Yeah, would want that.
Right. So I'll put you in touch with our insurance company. In fact, Mary can put you in touch with our insurance company.
Have you guys dealt at all with kids with special needs?
We haven't yet. We would like to. The Montessori method is very good for children with special needs. I think I would argue that it's difficult even for children without special needs to do things like sit in a chair and listen to a lecture, and the repetitiveness of Montessori and the freedom within limits and so on allows for a good experience for special needs. So we haven't, but we would like to.
Yeah. And in terms of finding the parent facilitator or whatever we would call that position, is that something, would you guys be interested in doing the job search, or would that be our responsibility or together?
Yeah. So we would basically do the search for Wildflower heads of school. And then we would present candidates to you. We do an amazing job vetting, and we've attracted, I'm so very lucky that we attract like the Michael Jordans of Montessori. But part of what you guys should think about is basically the masterfulness of the teacher is also tends to be commensurate with the salary that they get paid. And so one of the things that you guys should think about is what you can make work in your model. and then we will look for people in that range.
And the location, is that search also driven by you guys? Or?
No, that you guys can leave, although we can help. We tend to have a good sense of what would make a good location just by knack. Walk into a place and I know this place doesn't have enough light.
Is that like all you think about?
So, if we are looking for a place, that we would need a nap space, what does that mean in terms of, like, how much more size is that? What does that mean?
Well, you can, depending on the number of children, but even with 12 or 13 children, it's remarkable what the way things, it's remarkable how daycare centers have packed children in, like sardines, basically. So it's not that much space. But pragmatically, what I might suggest is to start out for the first 2 or 3 months not napping in the space, just because it's just one extra
thing to deal with.
And in terms of the timeline, when should we start looking for a space?
I think it's worth starting to look now. The truth is that if a perfect space comes up now, you really wouldn't be in a position to take it because you then have to be paying rent on an empty space for several months. But starting to look at spaces now allows you to get a sense of what spaces are, what they run for, and so on. So when you do find that perfect space when the time comes closer, you can make a precise decision.
And is there anything that you guys have found is absolutely essential for the space?
So light is a big deal. I'm the wrong person to ask because I do it very much by intuition. Catherine is really good. It was really funny. We went on a search for actors, and Catherine said, I have these 2 spaces that I found. I looked at the first one and I thought, this is not going to work. And I looked at the second one and I thought, this is perfect. And Catherine later said, I understand why the first place wouldn't work. There was a parking lot in front of the space, which didn't have a connection to the street in the way that the others do. And I hadn't even thought about that. There was something that I knew. So I think Catherine is probably a good person to talk to about that.
Is there, aside from the licensing, is there any kind of building or zoning?
It needs to be zoned commercial.
Okay. Not for education or childcare?
No.
Just commercial, okay.
And then you recruited the artists for asking talent to ask and everything else.
That's right.
That was really good.
You need to be done commercial even if you don't need a license, or even if it's not an official school?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know the answer to that, and it's something for you to look into. What's interesting is that the co-op that I do know about, the Stay and Play co-op, which is in the Cambridge Community Center, that is certainly not zoned commercial, but it has the Cambridge Community Center is a special exception. So I don't know the answer to that. It is very possible that you can do it in the home. And it's interesting to talk about what shopfront schools mean for a toddler program, a toddler co-op. It could very well be in a home, and the shop front looks like something else. Like it looks like, you have the playground in the front yard or something like that.
We also have a question about how do sick days work for the
For
teachers?
the teachers, yeah. Well, the lovely thing about being a co-op is if the teacher is sick and can't show,
Yeah.
well, there are parents in the classroom, and presumably you'll have 2 parents in the classroom. It's also overwhelming. Again, at the beginning, I would recommend more rather than less. So I would start out with like 3 or 4 parents in the classroom, and then work your way down to 2 parents in the classroom. I find it to be enough work to take care of my son. So what we do at Wildflower is we do exactly that. If a teacher is sick, we call the parents and say, is anybody available? And then,
Yeah. And can I ask, from a perspective of Montessori, it can't be that the children walk in the door and they know how to set tables
Yeah,
and
that's right.
the order just appears. How long does it take to...
Normalize?
Yeah.
Yeah. It varies per child, and this is one of the questions that I would probably ask the Montessorians themselves. I think it's an ongoing process, but I will say that I saw huge changes in the classroom within a week with 2 masterful teachers. You know?
Yeah.
But I think if you were to ask the teachers, they would say, and I still see, like, we have observers come in and it's amazing, like, my friend Juan, who's starting Wildflower School in Puerto Rico, came to observe, and it's amazing. Dario came and put his hand on Logan's shoulder, and these are 3-year-olds, and Logan turned and said, yes, Dario. Did something, and then Logan laughed and then turned to Juan and said, Dario said such good jokes. And then he said, in the meantime, Nev was cutting celery on her own and making her own ants on the lawn. So it's remarkable to see what the children are capable of and how quickly, I mean, within a couple of months. And so I'd say certainly within a week you see a big difference. Within 2 months you see a very normalized classroom. I suspect if you talk to the teachers, they will say they still have so much more to go, and it could be even a much more normalized classroom than what they have.
There was a question going forward. There's obviously some risk involved with this, and a lot of money that's at stake. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So, you know, the way that I think about the risks of this toggle program is that, I mean, there is, I'll say kind of risk to us, which is if we're able to work out some way to give a startup loan, a startup industry loan, and you guys hold an eye, that's a risk for us. My sense is that's what money is for. I mean, like, you guys are clearly like not flaky, and you're doing something beautiful, and so my sense is I'm not worried about that. I don't see that as a risk. I see that that's what risks are for. There's a risk to you guys that you put in a year lease, and so you commit to some form of tuition or gift or something like that, and then something happens and things don't work out. I'd say, you know, one thing that I find is people tend to underestimate institutional risk and overestimate entrepreneurial risk. So there are similar risks that, like, you commit to tuition at a daycare, and it turns out that there's such heavy rotation of teachers that it's a poor experience for your child, and you pull your child out and you lose the tuition, you know. So I don't see those risks as actually different from the risks at putting a child in an existing program.
Is there a legal entity established for each school, or is everything just under the Wildflower Foundation?
So yes, each school is its own independent nonprofit, its own independent board, and manages its own independent finances.
And can you guys walk us or help us to be establishing that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have lawyers that they set up here now. Perfect.
And whose name would it at least be under? Would it be
It would be, so,
the particular school or?
so it would ideally be the nonprofit. And this is where it gets challenging, and it would be some places require kind of a personal guarantee, you know, and that ideally you would not have to deal with, but if you do, I mean, you guys can talk amongst yourself and figure out if there's a way that you can all jointly sign on a personal guarantee for the lease or something like that. It's a shame. It's a shame that kind of there's all of these little things that are rigged for people that have money, you know. And so we're trying to kind of flip that. So I suggest, and this is one of the reasons why it's useful to start looking at spaces early, is to kind of get a sense of how many spaces look for a personal guarantee, how many don't. You may be able to kind of address issues of personal guarantee by doing things like paying half of the year's rent up front, and that way you can just collect
Do you guys have a real estate agent you've worked with in the past to understand what you're looking for?
We do, and I wouldn't say he's found one place for us, because the other two places I ended up finding out on my own. So he's not very versed, but he's good and he has some sense. So we are happy to introduce him to you.
That's my place. But I know some good people that are in the area.
And
That's cool. Make it work.
yeah. So, and that's something like, I would say something like, with the space design, I very, very strongly suggest Kim, our person who does space. But the real estate, I think you can choose whoever you want. We're happy to introduce you to ours. Our realtor is not really he's not yet kind of like the master of the nine principles.
Right.
We're going to find a couple options first and then bring Kim. Yes, no.
Well, is that what we should do? Is we should bring one of us in?
Is Kim a real estate agent?
No, Kim is the designer.
Okay, sorry, I thought you meant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Kim I would suggest doing, but for a realtor, I think you guys can use your own.
I meant for who from your
position. That would, I would be the closest, but maybe it'll be either me or Catherine or Caitlin.
That's it.
Yeah. It'll be either me or Catherine or Caitlin who we'll kind of give you a shepherd for this, and they'll be the person who is your contact person.
Do you have a vision for as far as where they're located throughout the city, or?
Yes.
I think we were talking last night, obviously it wouldn't make sense to do this down the block.
Yeah.
So we're kind of
Although it wouldn't be crazy. I mean, there's parents who have toddlers and 3-year-olds, and but we do like to space them out. And
many of us might be those parents.
But mostly, kind of the big thing is to have them be walkable to the families who they will serve.
So it might make sense to think of the families and then pick a spot on them.
Yeah, that's right. And you had suggested, I think you suggested like Davis and Union or something like that.
Yeah.
Both of those will work really well. We have here in Cambridge, East Cambridge, and Inman are 3 of the current locations in 3 to 6 programs. So always feels kind of nice to have something stuff in the city. It will be in this is not public knowledge yet, but it will be in the back of Lauren Ibsen bookstore.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually saving the bookstore because we'll pay the rent and they're very well paid.
I'm always worried about that bookstore. The one in Inman, Florida. Would they use bookstore?
And at what point would the parent education start, or should we recruit someone to educate us?
No. We should start the parent education, and basically we're in the process of putting a program together, and that will be, if you have an appetite for it beforehand, send me an email, and I'll send it along to Catherine, and Catherine will get that started. Marcia is our toddler person, and she's in China for the summer doing teacher training.
Right.
So she'll be back in the fall, and we're thinking of starting up a fall parent training program this month.
Yeah.
But if there's appetite over the summer, we'd like to support that appetite, and Catherine will probably do a series in the spring.
Yeah, I think we were probably talking about the possibility of starting education over the summer. It seems like it's one of the things that is an important element.
Yeah, one of the big hurdles.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be great.
And is there a cost with that?
What we'll try to do is make the cost as reasonable as possible, and we'll do it a la carte. So I know with Marcia, it was something like $15 per family. And so it will likely be something like that.
And some of us had talked about doing something a little more informal in the meantime, but getting the kids together, letting them get to know each other, and either with or without some element of childcare. I know when we had spoken on the phone the first time, you had mentioned that this space was available through the summer.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that. The space for the summer. So the space is available for the summer. We would have to think about, and we'd like to rent it, because otherwise we're losing money on rent. We would have to have a number of conversations about what the classroom looks like. But Mary and I will talk afterwards, and we'll figure something out to the extent that there's
Yeah, and I guess, is there anything else going forward that we should be thinking about?
No, you guys have been pretty thorough in the questions.
About, so obviously for many of our kids who are approaching 2, and if the school that we're talking about starting is a 0-3 institution, it means they'll graduate from it fairly quickly. Is there yet been a discussion about continuity for spaces for kids that are in that kind of early class being able to graduate into 3 to 6?
Yeah, and this is very natural. Basically, as soon as the school starts, the families in the school start to talk about what's next, because the school is so the Wildflower families are talking about starting with the 6 to 9 for the Wildflower families. And we will support you in continuing. So we'll continue that conversation. What might very well happen is the space we have right now a 4 to 7 school that is going to turn into a 6 to 9 school. So the children will just grow into 6 to 9, and then we'll start admitting 6-year-olds when it's a 6 to 9. And you can think about something very similar as a toddler program that graduates to a 3 to 6 program, and then start admitting new 3-year-olds in that program.
Is there a way that we can talk to some of the current families about their experience?
Absolutely, yeah. So one way is, if you send me an email, I can put you in touch with a couple families. But we're also doing this planting. We're doing this permablitz, tomorrow between 10:30 and 12:30. And so you can come on by and talk to the families.
What is the exact location of that?
We're not going to Science Museum anymore. No, I was going to tell you, don't worry. I know it.
So I would probably go there at around So the families will be there starting at 11:30, but you want to give them a little bit of time to get in the groove. So if the next schedule permits, I'd probably go there at around noon.
And is it the little
It's
park? That's
it's on Lee Street. It's has like the patch of grass which people bring to their dogs run around, and then there's a playground.
Yeah.
Oh, it's called the Wilder Play.
Will we need stereo then? I feel like we
Yeah, you will.
owe him a thing. We also had a question if it's, I don't know if any of this is in a state that you could share it, but if you have perhaps business plans or things that we could look at just to get
Yeah, it's really interesting. We could put together some kind of financials for some of the existing schools. Business plans we don't have, just because they always change. They change the day after you start. But it's useful to have kind of pro forma budget, and so we can. I want to kind of make sure that it's clean, so I'm not divulging sensitive information about the families, about the teachers. But once we do, then we'll have to look at it.
And going forward, should we get the email about something? Should it go to you or to Catherine?
I think you can start by emailing me, and I might very often kind of reply and just CC Catherine or CC Caitlin, but I can be the point person.
Okay. Don't want to bombard you because I know you're going to be at the beach.
But I should find a shepherd for you guys, and I'll talk to people and see who the appropriate shepherd is. But it actually might be Caitlin. Catherine would be a natural person to do it, but she's here 1 week a month, and sometimes life doesn't happen on that schedule. So let me talk to both of them and see who wants to take that on, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Anyone else have any other questions?
Really excited. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, so much for you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Behind that door, also part of your...
Yeah, that's the teacher's office. Yeah, if you go there and then go down in the basement.
Could we see the school, the artist studio?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. The artist studio is not much to see. It's basically a table with some...
You know what this was? So I have this like round in my office. We're going into the center for Charlotte. Oh yeah, I'm so excited. I just saw this like thing on the side of the road, and I took it and I'm like, I'm making something. They look like little benches, but they're not. And there's two like that, and then there's one that's higher. Hi.